happy Women's History Month. Yesterday was International Women's Day, so I just want to thank each and every one of you ladies who have contributed to, all the beauty that you guys have to give to this world. So I want to say really thank you guys. Thank you guys for coming out and supporting the Edenville Library. Who's first time here? All right, I'm watching. It better not be your last one. We have a lot of great events coming up, so I just want to do a few logistics things, and then we're just going to dive right in. So we have quite a few different events coming up that's honoring women. The first one is we have Women's History Breakfast, Daring Women of the Skies Breakfast. It's going to be on March 14th at the at the Orlando History Center. So that's something for you guys, as well as we have the Women's the Women in the Arts Expo. It's a big, I have a big display in the back, so when we finish up, you can go back and find out all the information when it starts. And also we have any other events, not only women events, but we have a lot of events throughout the Orange County Library system. Our next one here will be, it's not women, but it's also honoring humanitarians. So this gentleman's name is Kevin Ball. He was once a stuntman out in Hollywood turned humanitarian. And one of the great things about it, as far as celebrating women, the person, Cindy McCain, did the forewords for this book. So he's going to be here speaking, just saying how he went from Hollywood and just didn't want to be in Hollywood anymore to documenting a lot of great things that went on in different countries where they're less fortunate than we are. So.
Cindy McCain and John McCain's wife.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he worked directly with her and still is working directly with her for so many causes we have. Wow. All right. And last but not least, at the end of this, we would love for you to fill out a survey and let us know. There's some that's out on the table, as well as there's a QR code if you want to just hit the QR code and let us know how we're doing. We will greatly appreciate it so we can bring more programming. And if you have ideas, please let us know some things that you may want to see or you maybe have seen somewhere else. All right. So this year's the national theme for Women's History Month is about inclusivity and diversity. So one of the things when I thought about this theme is definitely who Barbara is. She's all about diverse and uplifting people from different cultures, different backgrounds, just being different. And as we all know, who knows Barbara, she's very different. Yes, she is. And we love that, and she embraces her wholeness. So one of the things when we first came up with this idea, there's a lot of things you can go online and learn about Barbara. You know her about running for city commissioner. You know about her running the Heritage Center down in Hannibal Square. But what we wanted to do is kind of create just us sitting down, a sip and chat. Just where she can just tell you that all the glamour and everything that you see, all of the accolades, it was a cost that she had to pay to get to that. And so she wanted to share some of this with you guys. She said there's some people who've known her for years, and there's things she will be talking about that probably none of you have ever known about. But she is vulnerable, she's raw, and she's willing to really share some of the things with you guys. And at the end of the section, she's going to have a Q&A. So without further ado, Miss Barbara Chandler. Oh.
You've done yourself. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay.
So you can move the pillows, you can throw them on the floor, you can kick your shoes out, do whatever you
my
need.
old surges.
So she will have her fans.
You're amongst friends here.
Nice. Thank you. You gotta come to my house and redecorate. Thank you all so much.
Okay, so you play this.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Barbara Chandler, and I am running for City Commissioner of Winter Park. Commission, it will be the first time in over 125 years that a person who looks like me has held office in the city of Winter Park. In 25 years. I want to say directly to all of Winter Park families that I am here for you.
All right. So Barbara, I found this quote by Georgia O'Keeffe which says, "Art is not what you see, it's what you make others see." So what I would like to do is start from a landscape of the blank canvas where you started from. Can you tell us a little bit about you growing up in where you're from, and tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. First, I want to say thank you so much for all that you've done, for inviting me here and making me feel so special. I really appreciate it. And I thank everyone who has taken the time to come over and hear me and get to know me a little bit more personable. Coming from the Virgin Islands, I left St. Thomas when I was 8 years old with my mother and my sister. I come from a family of 10. I'm the youngest of 10 brothers and sisters. And my parents divorced. And like most people from the islands, we decided to move away for better opportunities, education always being primarily that reason. So I came here when I was a mere 8 years old. The youngest four of us, my two brothers, my sister and we came here to my aunt who was already living here. My mother came first. This is normally how it happens. My mother came first and she secured work. She stayed with my aunt and they actually worked at Guardian Care, the hospital off of John Young, what was the first African American hospital. And my aunt worked there as well. Most Caribbean women, when they come, they go into that CNA field. And then she secured housing, and shortly thereafter, we came, and that was a huge transition. My biggest memory of coming into Central Florida is Cimarron, and then Colonial, and all those bright lights, and all those car lots, and you feel like you've arrived, like, oh shucks, I'm somewhere. So my sister and I, we were well dressed. That was when you dressed to travel. So I want to believe like the night before we had a reception or something we attended. So we came through the airport in these very colorful long dresses and these like scarves around us. And that's always a memory that stays with me in moving here.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was the reasoning you guys moved here?
Well, after my parents' divorce, my father moved to New York, and again, when you are in the islands and opportunities, there are not a lot of opportunities, moving away is always the thing that you end up doing. And so my mother saw Florida as that place. She herself had been to New York on a couple of occasions. She would go and visit family, but she did not want us being raised there. So Florida, of course, the weather. We had relatives here. I had one aunt and her children, they were already here. They were somewhat stabilized here as well. We had extended family that was in the Apopka area. There's a large Caribbean community in the Apopka area that's always been there. And so this became our home.
So leaving St. Thomas, if you think about as a childhood, what would one of your fondest memories or a fun fact that you would like to share with us about St. Thomas?
Yeah, it's going to the beach. We lived on the beach. We could walk to the beach. It was a part of, I always say, growing up, one of the things our parents gave us, my mother and father gave to my brothers and sisters and I, is a really strong sense of spirituality. They would wake us up 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So here I was, less than 8 years old, waking up at 4 or 5 o'clock. And we were either worshiping and praying in the home, or they would take us to the beach. And this was, before the sun break. And so that's where I really gained a sense of who I was, is in that period in time. And we would spend the rest of the day on the beach. So the beach was a normal recreation activity for us to do. We could walk to the beach. So when we came here, and you got to drive an hour away, that was like deprivation. That's deprivation. So going to the beach, cookouts on the beach, frying fish, frying Johnny cake, and going to the marketplace. The marketplace, what they now call the farmer's market, that's where I learned commerce. That's where I learned you sell your goods and you get your money. And so my aunts, they baked pies of what we call tarts, the fruits, the kenneps, the mangoes, and if I'm there with them, they would slip me like a little quarter or something. So that's one of those two are two of my fondest memories of being on the island.
So like in most artistic movies, the sceneries change, the location change.
Yeah.
A lot of different things came about. So what, with that transition, who was left, did all 10 of you come here?
No.
Okay.
No, just the last 4 of us came at the same time. One of my oldest sisters actually, brought us over. Because when we stayed behind for my mother to secure housing and to secure a place to work, we stayed with another relative. So my 2 brothers stayed with my father, as men stay with boys stay with men, and so my sister brought us over.
Okay. So with that family, because you guys had such a huge family unit, it was such a beautiful time that you guys spent together. What was it like being that transition of being separated?
Yeah, it was, oh gosh, I remember my sister and I, when we stayed at my mother's good friend's home, we got in trouble. My sister and I got in trouble, and we got a beating. We got beat for it, and I was pretty stubborn. I did not cry, and it was intentional that I didn't cry because I didn't want to feel that you really had this much power over me to now beat me where this was my mother's job. And so it was, in hindsight, looking back at it, I see the necessity of doing it that way. But I was always with my mother as the youngest. I was always with my mother. One of my memories of walking, we walked everywhere in certain instances. Walking along what we call Main Street, waterfront, because you could get a ride back then, but I was always with my mother. So when you're not with her, when I wasn't with her for that period, of course I had my sister who's 2 years older than me, but being in my mother's presence was very special for me.
It was a very close bond. I remember you speaking about your mother, how close you guys were and are. One of the things that with this transition, there was time when you needed to break out, break free. Yeah. Can you tell us about that moment? There was, I call it, as I'm doing these different acts, we're creating a movie of the art of being Barbara. I wanted to create this canvas because your life is a canvas that has created a masterpiece. But that masterpiece didn't come easy.
No.
So I call this, the change of scenery of this one is the Hawaii Awakening.
Yeah, Hawaii, good old Hawaii. So how I say that was my first manifestation. Growing up, I loved Hawaii 5-0. I loved, I did, I'm cheesy. crazy. And I would always say, one day I'm going to Hawaii. One day I'm going to Hawaii. I'm going. I even went home prior to going to Hawaii. Went back to St. Thomas for the first time after I left around 15. And one of my cousins who lived with us for a bit here in Florida, he teased me. He was like, Barbara, have you been to Hawaii yet? And I was like, no, but I'm still going. And certainly enough, I ended up in Hawaii. And how I ended up there, my mother remarried. Once my mother remarried, my sister and I, we are the last two that are at home at that time. And it wasn't the best situation. And so my sister ended up going back to St. Thomas, and I went to Hawaii to live with my oldest sister, whom I'm much like her. We look a lot alike. I'm surprised she's not here. And my mother thought me being with her, and my sister's very structured. She's military, or was military, very structured, very meticulous, very neat. And I think my mother felt that she would be the best model for me. So there I was, this young, cute girl in Hawaii.
Trouble.
Yeah, and not a whole lot of, and not that my sister and brother-in-law, pardon me, that's where I just came into me. That's where I came into, because this was the first time I had what I'm going to call real freedom. My mother was strict. My older sisters, a couple of my older sisters, they got pregnant very early. They became teenage mothers. And so what happens is your mother clamps down on the rest of you. Mm-hmm. So I got the clamp. I got squeezed. And a person like me getting squeezed is not a good thing, because I'm always looking for that room. And so Hawaii was that place. I don't want to say that my sister allowed me to do what I wanted to do, but I definitely took liberty of the fact that she was not as tight as my mother was. And so there I was, this young Popolo girl, Popolo meaning black, running around on the island of Hawaii. In Hawaii, you could be nobody, you blend in. I went to Moanalua. I'm a Menehune. I never run into any other Menehunes. When you first get there, you hear the language, you hear the pidgin. They speak their own, what do we call it, slang. And over the time, I picked up on it, when you're in Rome, you do as the Romans. And so being there was real diversity for me. I got exposed to real diversity.
You were not going to say earlier diversity. There we go.
Yeah, real diversity. I had my Hawaiian friends, my Samoan friends, my Korean friends, my Filipino friends. My teachers all were from different places, Tonga. So that was real diversity. The music, the food, the overall culture, their spirituality and what they believed in, how they respected the land, the language. So for me, that Hawaii is a very special place for me. I was able to go back in October. A friend of mine's, she turned 60, and the tickets were extremely reasonable. And I said, oh my goodness, I'm going back for the first time in 30 years. In 30 years. And it was extremely moving. I am considered there, someone who lived there and came back. I am considered a kama'aina. That means you are part of the community. So that was very refreshing. I went back to my high school, Moanalua High School, and gosh, in Hawaii, I was a whole other person, y'all. I was a whole other person, and I love being there. Of course, now it is just like a lot of places, very overdeveloped. I visited a few places. I took the bus. I love to go to a place and act like I live there, and it was easy to do in Hawaii because I had been there, so I was able to navigate the space very well. I love Hawaii.
So one of the things when I was talking to Barbara, I had an opportunity to sit and talk to her about it. Did you guys see how much she lit up when she started talking about Hawaii? Like there was a whole shift when she talked about Hawaii, and you could just feel that energy and that love. One of the, could you please tell them about the funny story about like, because it's important to tell them the way you dressed. It's very, very important.
I can share that. So in Hawaii, again, it's a hot climate, tropical climate, and at that time, you know, fashion was not a thing per se. So I could get away with walking around in midriff and Daisy Dukes and flip flops because that's what we were doing. I wasn't out of the norm to do that. But I came from a mother a religious mother, a stepfather that was a pastor in the church. So imagine being that comfortable within myself and coming back here to Central Florida.
So I wanted to say that because when she was explaining to me, talking to me about these things and the way she dressed, in my head, I was like, girl, you was fast. But what was the amazing thing about that particular situation? Because it's, once again, we see things the way we want to see them.
Yes.
She wasn't a fast girl. She wasn't. And she explained this to me. It was because when she came back to States, which she'll talk more about that, it was hard for her to kind of acclimate because people would see what they thought they wanted to see of who she was, and that wasn't who she was. So she got treated certain ways only based on the way she dressed, and she was just showing in the world being her authentic self. So.
Yes, I had a question about when you said the word fast.
Yes.
Because that's a term that we used when I was very young, and I didn't know if everyone knew what that meant.
Yeah.
Same
Same thing.
Same thing. We almost
We all know. Yeah. Barb was not by herself.
We knew what fast
When
was.
that word was used, you were offended.
Yes, exactly.
That's exactly right.
We know it when we hear it.
Yes.
In the context. And I worked. I want to say my first job, I've been working since I was like 14, 15. And in Hawaii, I worked. I worked and I made my own money. I worked in what was like a CVS, Walgreens. I worked in the cosmetics department, of course. And that was my afternoon job, my summer job. And I had stayed there for a very long time, for maybe about a year and a half. And so I gained a lot of my independence in Hawaii. Again, my sister wasn't as strict on me, so I could move around freely, and I could move around freely because I always had money. And that was empowering for me. So I controlled a lot of who I was and what I could do because I worked and I always had money.
So.
How many years did you live in Hawaii?
For 3 years.
So that was 14 and 17,
Yeah,
correct?
that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So at 17, you moved back here, and as we're continually change the scenery, change the location, change the palette of colors that you're using, and the tools that you were using, the mediums that you were using to create your masterpiece. I came to like we have the Renaissance, and then we have the Baroque period. But not Baroque like the Renaissance, Baroque. So I want to talk a little bit about the struggling artist. And so James Baldwin once said, all art is a kind of a confession, more or less obliged. All artists, if they are to survive, are focused at last to tell the whole story, to vomit up the anguish of. So, there was a timeline that I was wanting to talk about. Can we talk about a little bit about you having, did you? During. Okay, so let's talk about becoming a mother. I asked Barbara, what was her, all the accolades and all the beautiful things, all of the things she's done in her life, and in a second, she said her biggest achievement was being a mother. She said there was no other greater achievement that she could even think about, no price, no anything, and it was her children. So can you tell me about becoming the children, and then we'll get into that little.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So when I came back from Hawaii, here I was, I'll let you get that, came back from Hawaii. It was definitely a culture shock for me. I just did not feel like I fit in. I was like, what is happening? Again, going back to the clothing that I wore and how I was perceived, you attract the wrong kind of people, right? And I'm not here to bash anyone. The father of my children, very attractive man. I fell for him. He saw me and he was like, ooh. And I saw him and I was like, ooh. And so we fell for each other. I bore my first son from him probably within months of meeting him. I got pregnant from him, I should say. And my oldest son is Antonio. My next son, my first two sons are maybe 11 months and something apart. They're not, maybe a year and, they're right at a year. They're right at a year, yeah. One is in March and one is in April. And then shortly thereafter, my youngest son, Ashton. And it was one of those relationships, now that I know that when you don't know a person and you don't know what a person is capable of and you have children from them, and the goal as a woman, as a mother, is to try to make the situation work. It was not the ideal situation. I'm a survivor of domestic violence, physical, mental, financial, you name it. And it took me down in certain cases. It took me down. I had an older sister that lived here at the time, and she was my safe space. She was my safe space. Gertrude, my oldest sister, Gertrude. And my oldest sister is the one who kind of walked me through it, because if you have not been in an abusive situation, a lot of times you don't want to admit to it. You don't want to admit this is really, everybody knows it's happening. Just because you're not saying it, that doesn't mean that they don't know what's happening. But my children were also my why. They were my why as to why I needed to keep one foot in front of the other, why I needed to keep my head up, why I needed to decide to come out of it. It was important for me, not growing up with a father, that my children had a father. Then you start to realize, wait a minute, wait, what kind of role model are they seeing? This is not what I want them to see. And so in that situation, there were times where I left. I would leave. I would go leave to leave the situation. And then a lot of times that placed me in a homeless situation. I'm pretty tough. And so I had to navigate that space the best way I could. And there were years when him and I would be apart from each other. And what I learned in that is that a lot of times, just because you are apart, that does not mean you have ended the relationship. Just because you have left, that does not mean you have ended the relationship. So a lot of times I would be apart from him, and then maybe a year or two I would think that he was in a better situation or in a better frame of mind, and I would go back. And that was not the case. And I'm not here to bash him. I just needed to know who I was and how strong I was to know that I did not have to go back. You go back for several reasons, whether it's finance, whether it is the picture perfect lifestyle. He was good looking, I was good looking, we had beautiful kids, he was smart, we had fun, and so I wanted what I thought was the ideal looking relationship, but that wasn't the case. That was the case.
No. Yeah, so Thank you for sharing that. That was when one of the things we talked about was she really wanted to share that with people who didn't probably know these things about is that where you are is not where you're gonna stay.
Right.
And so one of the beautiful things that, as we transition into another location is the beauty of abstract reality. And you talked about mentors and finding, Mr. Rogers once talked about finding the helpers.
Yeah.
And you found the helpers. And could you expound on that a little bit about, because a lot of them were gentlemen.
Yeah.
But they were very respectful. So if you can speak about
Mostly
that.
women, mostly women, but one particular mentor was a man, which balances the situation. So being that I left home very young, going to Hawaii, being in that space, there was a teacher there who took to me, and her name was Miss Glazier. She was a Caucasian woman that also had moved to the island, military reasons, but she worked as maybe like a guidance counselor, I can't quite remember. And Miss Glazier was there for me in a space where when I'm at this very critical time where most young women are with their mothers. They are with their mothers, they're guiding them through the process, they're disciplining them, and I wasn't with my mother. So she showed up for me in that way. Other times in life, when I came back, because of probably my stubbornness or my lifestyle at the time, it didn't fit with my mother. And my mother was definitely into the church. She was a minister, a pastor's wife, that kind of thing. And so in that, again, I am kind of fleeting around on my own. The next person I run into, her name was Delcia Banks. Delcia Banks was also from another island, and she kind of took me under her wing. And with her, the relatability was the fact that she was from the islands. The fact that she was from the islands, she understood where I was at that particular point as a young woman raising 3 boys, on public assistance, but she saw that, oh, this is just for a time. She would tell me that this is just for a time. This is not going to be always. This is not going to last. You will not be in this place in the next 4 or 5 years. And I would be like, really? Because it doesn't feel like that when you're going through it. It's a little bit blurry. And of course, when you come out of it, you're working, you come out of it. There was another good friend who is still in my life today, Linda Streeter. And Linda Streeter, when I met her, I was going to the Y, and she says, she had a company and it was called Living Radiantly. And she said, Barbara, you can live radiantly. And I was like, really? And she gave me tools and insight. The male mentor, Harry, he came along as well. And I think where it balanced it out, again, as a young woman, not having a father figure, not knowing exactly what to look for in a man because you have not had that model, Harry was very instrumental in kind of shaping me and shaping how men are supposed to treat me. And so that was a good experience for me. He was very respectful. There was never any intimacy or anything like that. He just saw me. I was working. I had a lot of jobs. I was working at I was working for this woman, Celestial Transportation, a transportation company, and that's where he met me. And from there, he kind of took me on as a father figure. So I appreciate that.
So, can you tell us about one of the jobs when you said that you knew you could do, and the reason why you could do it?
Oh gosh,
Yes.
yeah. So after being at home, I stayed home with my children until they went into kindergarten. When my last son went into school, into kindergarten, I was like, okay, Miss Barbara, what you gonna do? Because I was used to making money. What skills do you have? Da 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 da. And at that time, it was telemarketing. I come from a family of aunts who bake their pies, sell it. My grandmother, I come up from a selling group of women. And I said, okay. I remember back then it was, you would go through the classifieds, Orlando Classified, such and such would be hiring, and they would have the phone number there. I said, okay. It would be a list of telemarketing jobs. And you would call, and I knew you need to sound right on this phone, Barbara. In order to get this job, this is your entry. And so I knew that I learned ways on how to get past the gatekeeper. That was very important because the gatekeeper can keep you away, right? That's why they're there. But I knew what questions to get to the hiring person. And once you learn how to navigate that, they're going to say, come in for this interview. So once I started working after the boys went off to school, I was one of those people who were calling y'all up. That was me on the other end. And whether it was lawn service, whether it was to switch your telecommunications, if you had MCI, to whatever company, and I was very effective. I was very good. I got bonuses, and I elevated into a managerial position. And how I got that position, I was in between. As someone runs into me who saw me in another office.
Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
No, I wanted to stay there,
Yeah.
but the one thing that I love about what she said is before she did the telemarketing thing, she said, so for those of people who don't think they fit in or they don't have a certain thing, she said, I have a skill, I can talk.
Yeah.
I can talk all day and all night,
That's
so
right.
I can talk.
Yeah.
So that was my
Yeah.
skill set. I didn't have a
Yeah.
degree,
Yeah.
and none of those things, but I love how that she stood and like, she knew instantly because she had been making money since she was 14 years old. She knew how to stand as a woman saying, you know what, I got this skill.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use it to the highest point, so it
That's
goes
exactly
into your
right.
natural leadership.
Yeah, that is exactly right. Yes, I knew that. And I want to talk about the talk part. Remember, I came here at 8 years old with this thick accent. And at 8 years old, coming to the Central Florida in the South, I went to, the first school we went to was Catalina. We got teased. Why you talk like that? What do you mean? This how I don't talk. You know, I didn't know how to navigate that. You know, you would go home and say, oh God, they teasing me. My brothers and sisters were with me in the same school, but I'm the youngest. And, you know, just tell them, no, man, that ain't gonna work. Be strong. And no, that's not gonna work. You know, and so I began to acclimate to a better way of speaking so I would not get teased, right? And so in doing that, amongst African Americans, it becomes, wait a minute, you now sound white, right? And so living in Hawaii, that was probably my saving grace because I could speak Pidgin in Hawaii. And Pidgin is, its own slang. But then you come back here and again, having to have work, I needed to talk, and I knew I needed to speak properly. And properly means different things for different people, and we'll talk about that a whole other time. But in order to get that telemarketing position, I knew I had to speak properly. Properly for me in this case meant clearly, convey the message, and be able to get whatever sale I needed to get to bring money home to my home. Yeah. So I elevated into a managerial position from there, and I ran a telemarketing office. That was interesting. I swore I was going to do a sitcom on that. That was very interesting. I stayed there for about 3 or 4 years. I elevated other people. I oversaw an office of maybe 30 phone solicitors and maybe 5 or 10 drivers. So that was my first in. And how I got that position, the office was just starting off. And someone ran into me and said, hey, we're just starting the office. It was in Pine Hills, and I've lived in Pine Hills. So I was like, oh, this is good, because I'm close to that area. And the person said, you know, you can start. So I was like, okay, all right, I'll start. So I was on the phone for a couple of weeks, and one day I walked in, and the person who was the manager, he needed to go out as a driver. It was one of those where we're gonna be in your area this week and we're picking up clothes that we'd like for you to, and the drivers didn't show up. Two of the drivers didn't show up. So he needed to go out on the route. So I walked in, and as I walked in, he said to me, "Are you ready to run the office today?" And I was like, "Huh?" He said, "I need you to run the office while I'm out." And there were a few other people that had been there for a while. I said, "Well, don't you want, you know, whomever to do it?" He said, "No, I want you." And so he taught me that at that time we were using the predictive dialers, for those of us who have worked in telemarketing office. And so it was the DOS system. And so he had to teach me that like in 15, 20 minutes. And so that was my first managerial position.
What I love about that trajectory is that you didn't have an education. Can you speak a little bit about not having that formal
education? Yeah. So when coming back from Hawaii, having my children immediately, I did not go to college. And so one of the things I would do, because my sister influenced this so much, I would read. One of the first books, I was working at a really upscale telemarketing office at the time. It was actually called Miracle Ear. And it was fancy because you didn't have to dial. The calls would come in. So in between, you had downtime. And in that downtime of the calls, I would read. And so one of the first books that I read that really changed my thinking was Think and Grow Rich.
Oh my God,
a
classic.
Black Choice. And this was written or elaborated on by Dennis Kimbrough. Of course, Napoleon Hill, but Dennis Kimbrough wrote the edition where it was a Black choice. And so it changed my thinking like immediately. And so my sister, my amazing sister, was one of the very first Rastas in the Virgin Islands. And so she was always reading. She had a wealth of knowledge around Black history, history in general, and just the importance of reading, the importance of being able to educate yourself. I've taken classes. I took some leadership classes at Rollins, took some other classes maybe through Valencia or someone, but most of it was, and I also was exposed to very formally educated people. One of the trainers when I was at that phone room where I was managing that came in to help us grow, he was a member of Menses. And so he took, and Menses is where you have that, I hope I'm saying it correctly, have that very high IQ to be a part of it. And so I guess he saw something in me, and so he took me under his wing, and I learned a whole lot from him. He wanted me to send my sons off to Catholic school. And the reason, he said that the public school system is failing Black children. He said that to me. This was like in the mid-90s, late 90s, early 2000s. And he said that to me. He says, the public school is failing your children. You need to send your boys off to Catholic school. The other reason he wanted me to send them off is because then I would be able to go work for his other offices. And so for me to, again, being that I spent time away from my mother, for me to at any time send my children anywhere, that didn't sit with me. I knew I needed my sons, and my sons maybe needed me. They would have to tell you if they did or not. Yeah.
One of the things I really appreciated that really moved me when you were talking about how you navigated to rooms. But the beautiful thing about Barbara is when she walked into a room, no matter where and who she was with, she knew she belonged there. Yeah. And she also made herself speak in that room, because a lot of times you're invited to the room, you're invited to spaces, but they don't want you to just, they want you to be quiet. They don't want you to say anything. Barbara's like, no ma'am, this is, I talk, and I'm gonna talk, and my voice is gonna be heard, and even if it's trembling, it's still gonna be heard.
That's exactly right.
So I
That is
really
exactly right.
love and respect that about you.
And I come from a family, I'm the youngest of 10, y'all. And I'm really a quiet person. People don't know that about me. I'm really a quiet person. I'm a thinker. But I come from a family of 10 with brothers and sisters. If somebody says something to you and that you don't like, you can respond. So I'm validated in that. I have a point of view. I have a perspective. And I don't mind sharing it. My sister always says, if you see or if somebody is doing something that you feel is not correct, you can say something about that. You can say that. There's been times when I was in an abusive situation that I lost my voice. There's been other times where maybe work related, I've lost my voice. But what I did know how to do in certain cases is to find somebody who can help me to refine my voice.
And which leads us to a great point towards we're getting ready to, in the interview, is that your voice came through music. It came through dance and your love for the arts. Can you tell us how art, music, fashion, yes ma'am, has just kind of cultivated you into the woman you are today?
Y'all, so growing up in the house, again, my mother who was, my mother and my father, church music. I love hymns. Oh, I will sing a hymn in a minute. Let me not have a good day. So I love hymns. I love hymns. I love traditional hymns. But when my parents would leave the home, my brothers and my sisters who were becoming Rastas, they would be playing Bob Marley. They would be playing Peter Tosh. They would be playing that music, and here I am, I'm a little girl and I'm listening to all of this. I got the hymns in the morning at 5 o'clock. By 1 o'clock when the parents leave the house, I'm listening to Bob Marley. So music was always around me. My father was one of the first to play the steel pans in the islands. He was a part of the band. The drums, he was a part of like the Black Panthers and whatever was in the islands at that time. And so there was drumming around me. There was a family that lived next door. His name is Uhuru and Rwanda, and they would teach us African drum and dance. So music, you go downtown in the islands, there's music. Music is always around me, and that's my expression. Dance, my sister is the singer, the dancer. My sister Wanda, she was incredible at every single thing. So as the young sister, what do? You mimic her. You try your darnest to live up to that expectation, to do everything as well as her. So music for me is an amazing expression of who I am. If you go into my playlist right now, this morning, I just came back from New Orleans, so that music, I'm hooked. It's in my soul, it's in my system. It's very African, it's very tribal, and I love that. I love how I feel when I'm listening to it and I'm dancing. I have morning parties. I wake up to music and I probably dance maybe an hour to an hour and a half getting dressed and walking around. My dressing, my style, being dressed was a thing in the home. You do not go outside any kind of way. Why are you looking any kind of way? Right? That is not a thing. You were reprimanded for looking any kind of way. Even in my relationship, any kind of way. Why isn't your hair this way? And that's back then I had longer straight hair and that kind of thing. So there was always where with my mothers and whomever else, my sisters, you looked a certain kind of way. Like I said, when we came on the airport, we were like dressed like we were formally dressed to fly. So that those kinds of things, it stays with me. And I know we all say, we don't judge a book by the cover, but I do realize that when you walk into a room and you're dressed a certain kind of way, you get a different kind of response. And so a lot of my friends, if we're going somewhere and they're not familiar with it, and they say, Barbara, what should I wear? And my response is, dress how you would like to be received. Dress how you would like, because I went through so many wardrobes. I was like, they don't know you to wear this kind of stuff, Barbara. And so I always have to find my comfort level, and this is my comfort level. It's gonna be loud. It's gonna be different, you know. Yeah.
And I think that's as we come into a close, that I think that's one of the things that as talking to you, and then I went looking through some of your themes and your Facebook, some of your other things. That Will does get to see as well, is that because there was that voice that wanted to restrict you, telling you how to dress, telling you how to wear your hair, telling you what to do.
If my mother could see this now.
So that's why you see when she got that slick. But now you're Barbara.
Yeah.
You're Barbara.
Yeah.
And that's the masterpiece that we see now. And what's great about it, it hasn't stopped. And it's going to continue, because you're going to keep building on that collection.
Yeah.
You're going to keep building on till you build this museum that you've housed yourself in. And you share that with the world. And you share it in many different spaces with different type of people. And we're very grateful for that. And we're very humbled by that.
Yes.
So, in closing, what would be like a mantra of yours, or what would be something that kind of have propelled you and continue to motivate you and inspire you to continue doing what you're doing?
And that's a really good question, because I didn't see myself doing this work. Once Ashton left the house to go to USF, my last son, I was supposed to be traveling. I was supposed to be living this travel life. You know, I would come back and stay with my grandsons for 4 or 5 months. And so that's where I saw myself. But one of my mantras is, seize the moment, seize the day, seize the moment. Carpe diem, carpe moment, seize it, and being present, being very present. Working at the center, a lot of times at the center is a quiet space, much like a library. And because of how the center is structured, I don't have visual access to when people are walking in. So I'm in the quiet a lot. And I also live alone. And so I'm always listening. I'm an amazing listener. And that makes me very intuitive. It makes me extremely intuitive. So right now in this part of my life, I want to be able to, of course, be, I give myself space where I can spend more time cultivating my grandchildren. That's a big one for me right now. Through their education, through their activities. I have everybody's at a game right now. Everybody's at games and practices. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I not there? A lot of times I'm not there because I'm doing something else. And so they think I make the best curry chicken. And that warms my heart. That validates me. It's not the best, but they think it is. And so I'm cool with that. So for me, it's,
That's why you've answered it. And I think one of the things I was getting to is that one of the things you shared with me is the importance of taking care of yourself, because that's what you do. You are a helper, so always people are coming to you. And I love that a few months ago, Barbara decided to just up and go to Asheville. She's like, Ricardo, I'll talk to you later. I can't talk to you right now. I'm gonna go off to Asheville. And she just took this retreat and just took care of herself. And I think that's the season that you had kind of alluded to, about taking care of yourself and quieting the naysayers, quieting the people who say you can't or you should do. And I love that about that you're so about taking care of yourself, because as you know, as they say on the plane, when you take care of yourself, you can better take care of those around you.
Yeah.
And so you've done
That's a biggie.
yeah,
And it actually started, Jennifer saw me. Jennifer, and I were doing the podcast at Rollins, our table. The prior year, not last year, but the prior year, my niece, booked this fabulous, holiday vacation in the mountains of Gatlinburg in one of those big homes, and I paid my money to her, and my niece does not give back money. And I got sick, $400, and I got sick and I could not go. And I remember, it was during the holidays, it was for holidays, and my family was coming in from the Virgin Islands, and for us, it was a big deal to go where it was cold. We like it nice and warm. And so I could not go. I was on my couch, and I couldn't believe, oh my goodness, I'm sick. And I was alone. I was alone. I had one friend to come over and see about me. My daughter-in-law, of course, came over. My daughter-in-law was my son. And my son, who lives 20 minutes from me, for him to see me sick is like, get up, go out in the sun, run around. And I was like, no, for real, I'm sick. I'm not good. And I did not want that to be my Christmas ever again, or my holidays ever again. I didn't want to give so much of myself. And that was when I got recognized through the Orlando Magic, through the Orlando Sentinel, and something else. And I was like, wait a minute, this can't be the reward. I was like, this is off balance. And so that was a wake-up call, and it almost started to happen again the end of last year. So I said, okay, Barbara, you're doing too much, and you're doing something wrong. And here was the warning sign. This was the warning sign, and I heeded to that bad boy. I said, no, stop.
That's right.
You won't get me on that couch again. So yeah.
So with that, do we have any questions for Barbara? She's open for some questions.